I didn't cry when Emily left. That's the part that scared me the most. After 3 years together, after shared furniture and inside jokes and the kind of intimacy that rewires your nervous system, I expected devastation. Instead, I felt functional. I packed her books into neat boxes. I separated our mugs. I updated my Netflix password. I told friends we had grown in different directions. I said it with a straight face. I even believed it some days. But Valentine's Day has a cruel way of exposing what you've been pretending not to feel. Because it isn't just about love, it's about the absence of it. And that morning, as Seattle's gray light filtered through my apartment windows, I realized I wasn't as fine as I'd been performing. If you love slow-burn romances with humor, heart, and just enough chaos to feel real, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I always wonder where these stories land. Maybe someone out there needs to hear this today. Maybe it's you. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 31 years old, a freelance graphic designer who works from a small but surprisingly charming apartment in Capitol Hill. I have a weakness for overpriced coffee, structured routines, and pretending I'm emotionally independent. My friends would describe me as sharp, organized, maybe a little guarded. Emily used to call me strategic. I prefer practical. We broke up 2 weeks ago, not because of betrayal or drama, but because she wanted a life that included a house in the suburbs and possibly children before 35. I wanted space. Not from her, exactly, just from timelines that felt like deadlines. By noon on Valentine's Day, I had already decided to treat it like any other Friday. I answered emails. I finalized a logo concept for a bakery client. I ignored the group chat where everyone was posting photos of flowers, reservations, and carefully curated romance. Outside my window, couples walked past holding hands, scarves wrapped tightly around their necks against the cold drizzle. Seattle wasn't dramatic about love. It was subtle, understated, which somehow made it worse. The quiet happiness of strangers felt louder than fireworks. At 3 p.m, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Emily had posted a story, just a picture of a table set with candles. No caption, no face across from her. But the implication was obvious. My stomach did that uncomfortable flip I'd sworn I was too evolved to feel. I closed the app immediately and tossed my phone onto the couch like it had personally offended me. "You're fine," I muttered out loud. "You chose this." And technically, I had chosen not to compromise. I had chosen not to rush into a future I wasn't sure about. So why did it feel like I'd been left behind? By early evening, the loneliness settled in, not as heartbreak, but as quiet background noise. I ordered Thai food instead of cooking. I poured myself a glass of red wine I'd been saving for no particular reason. I even lit one of the candles Emily forgot to pack, which felt mildly rebellious and deeply symbolic all at once. I told myself this was empowerment, self-care, independence. But the truth hovered just beneath the surface. I didn't want to be strong tonight. I just didn't want to feel like the only person in the city who didn't have somewhere to be. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:14 p.m. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends were all out on dates. My family lived in Oregon. For a split second, a ridiculous thought crossed my mind. Emily. But that fantasy dissolved almost instantly. She wasn't impulsive like that. She was planned, deliberate. Whatever was behind my door wasn't closure. It was probably a neighbor needing something or a delivery mistake. Still, my pulse picked up in a way that surprised me. When I opened the door, the first thing I saw was red. A massive bouquet of roses, wrapped in crisp white paper, practically blocking the face of the person holding it. Then the bouquet lowered slightly, and I met the eyes of the woman behind it. Blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, rain clinging to the edges, clear blue eyes, a navy jacket with the logo of a local flower shop stitched over the chest. She looked about 28, maybe younger. There was a faint flush on her cheeks from the cold, and an expression that hovered somewhere between professional and amused. "Claire Bennett?" she asked, glancing down at her delivery tablet. My throat went dry. "Yes?" She looked back up at me, then at the bouquet, then at me again. Something shifted in her expression. Not confusion. Not exactly. More like curiosity. "Well," she said slowly, a corner of her mouth lifting. "Looks like someone didn't want you spending Valentine's Day alone." And just like that, the air inside my apartment changed. I didn't know yet that her name was Harper. I didn't know that she was 28, that she worked extra shifts every February because she claimed she liked watching love unfold from the sidelines. I didn't know that the roses weren't actually meant for me. All I knew was that I had been prepared to survive the night quietly, and suddenly, survival didn't feel like the only option. And I had no idea that the woman standing at my door was about to turn my carefully managed loneliness into something far more dangerous. For a split second, one reckless, hopeful second, I let myself believe someone had actually sent me roses. My brain moved embarrassingly fast, scanning possibilities. Emily? A secret admirer? Some long-lost admirer emerging on the most cliché night of the year? But even as that flicker of ego tried to bloom, the rational part of me kicked in. No one sent me roses. Not today. Not anymore. I think there's been a mistake, I said carefully, forcing my voice to sound steady instead of suspiciously fragile. The woman, Harper, though I didn't know her name yet, tilted her head slightly and double-checked the screen in her hand. Claire Bennett, apartment 3B. She glanced up at the number beside my door. This is 3B. A small crease formed between her brows. Huh. The bouquet lowered a little more, revealing her full face. She had one of those smiles that felt like it arrived before she decided to use it. Natural, slightly crooked, unpolished in a way that made it better. Okay, this is awkward, she added. Awkward is sort of the theme of my month, I replied, before I could stop myself. That earned a quick, surprised laugh from her. Good to know I'm matching the energy then. She scrolled again, then let out a quiet, "Oh," her lips pressed together like she was trying not to react too strongly. Yeah, these actually aren't yours. I folded my arms, not because I was cold, but because it gave my hands something to do. I gathered that. They're for a Claire B, but the last name is Benson, apartment 3D. She winced slightly. Same floor. My bad. She shifted her weight, the roses brushing lightly against her jacket. Although, she added casually, glancing back at me, it would have been way more romantic if they were yours. I snorted despite myself. I'll let the universe know it missed an opportunity. There was a pause. Just a second too long to be purely professional. Rain tapped softly against the hallway window at the end of the corridor. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed. She didn't move immediately toward 3D. Instead, she studied me in a way that wasn't invasive but wasn't neutral either. Her gaze flicked briefly to the inside of my apartment. Wine glass on the counter, takeout container half open. One lonely candle burning like it was trying too hard. When her eyes returned to mine, something softened. Rough Valentines? She asked. I could have lied. I almost did. But there was something about her tone, not pitying, not prying, that made honesty feel less humiliating. Define rough. She shifted the bouquet to her other arm. No dinner reservation, no suspiciously large teddy bear. No one hiding in your kitchen about to jump out and shout surprise. I glanced over my shoulder theatrically. If someone's hiding in my kitchen, I hope they're doing the dishes. That made her laugh again, fuller this time. It echoed faintly down the hallway, and the sound did something unexpected inside me. It cut through the heavy quiet that had settled over my apartment all evening. Okay, she said, smiling openly now. So maybe not tragic, just solo. Solo, I confirmed. She nodded slowly, like she understood that word on a personal level. Honestly, solo's underrated. Less pressure, fewer overpriced prix-fixe menus. She gestured lightly with the roses. You have no idea how many panic deliveries I've done today. Men trying to fix arguments. Women trying to apologize for forgetting. One guy sent flowers to the wrong girlfriend. Impressive, I murmured. February 14th is chaos in a red and pink disguise, she said. I just drive around and watch it unfold. And what do you do when it's over? I asked before I realized I was genuinely curious. She shrugged. Go home, order pizza, pretend I'm immune to symbolism. Then her eyes held mine for a beat too long. Sometimes it works. There it was again. That flicker of connection that had nothing to do with roses and everything to do with timing. I wasn't flirting. At least I didn't think I was. But my body had subtly shifted toward the doorframe instead of away from it. I hadn't told her to hurry. I hadn't closed the door. Well, she said lightly, lifting the bouquet again. I should deliver these to the correct Claire before she assumes she's been ghosted by romance. Probably wise, I replied. But neither of us moved immediately. A faint smile tugged at her lips. For what it's worth, she added. Whoever does send you flowers someday better make them count. I arched a brow. That sounded dangerously like professional advice. It is, she said. I take my job very seriously. I felt it then. Not sadness, not longing, but something warmer. A shift. The night didn't feel like something I had to endure anymore. It felt interrupted. "Good luck with Claire Benson," I said finally. She stepped back slowly. "Good luck with Solo," she replied. But as she turned down the hallway, the air felt different. Not healed, not fixed, just less heavy. And I found myself listening for the sound of her footsteps longer than necessary. I didn't know yet that she would be back at my door in less than 10 minutes, and this time, the roses would not be the reason. I was halfway through convincing myself that the entire interaction had been a brief, charming glitch in an otherwise uneventful night when the doorbell rang again. Same timestamp blinking on the microwave clock. Same soft hum of rain outside. My heart reacted faster than my logic. I didn't hesitate this time. I walked straight to the door, trying not to look like someone who had absolutely been hoping it would ring again. Harper stood there, slightly breathless, the roses no longer in her arms. Her hair had escaped the messy bun in a few loose strands that framed her face. She looked faintly embarrassed, but not uncomfortable. "So," she said, tucking her hands into the pockets of her navy jacket, "turns out Claire Benson isn't home, and she's not answering her phone. Which means I now have a very expensive bouquet sitting in my car with nowhere to go." I leaned against the doorframe. "Tragic. Extremely." She gave a dramatic sigh. "And company policy says I can't just leave it unattended. Also can't bring it back unless it's undeliverable after 3 attempts. She paused, eyes flicking up to mine. "This is technically attempt number 1. "And how many attempts are you planning to make?" I asked. She smiled slowly. "That depends." I felt it again. That subtle shift in the air, like something unscripted was about to happen. "Depends on what?" "On whether you'd be willing to help me solve a logistical crisis." I narrowed my eyes playfully. "Are you asking me to steal roses?" "I prefer the term temporarily rehome," she corrected smoothly. "Just until I figure out what to do with them." "You just said company policy?" "Company policy also says I shouldn't drive around holding onto a bouquet that's blocking half my windshield view." She tilted her head slightly. "Safety first." I laughed before I could stop myself. It wasn't forced. It wasn't strategic. It just came out, and that startled me more than her reappearance. I hadn't laughed like that all day. "So, what exactly are you proposing?" I asked. She shifted her weight again, rain glistening faintly on her jacket. "I drop the roses off here, purely for safekeeping. You keep them alive for, let's say, an hour. If Claire Benson calls back, I retrieve them. If she doesn't..." She shrugged casually. "Then they technically qualify as abandoned." "And then?" "Then," she said, eyes locking with mine in a way that felt deliberate, "you won't have spent Valentine's Day without flowers." The directness of it caught me off guard. Not in a cheesy way, in a confident, almost teasing way. She wasn't pitying me. She wasn't rescuing me. She was offering something light in a night that had been heavy. "You're very committed to this narrative," I observed. "I work in florals," she said. "Presentation is everything." There was a beat of silence where the sensible part of me considered closing the door, thanking her politely, returning to my wine and self-imposed solitude. But the sensible part of me had also been the one that chose a breakup 2 weeks ago because it felt logical. Tonight didn't need logic. It needed interruption. "Fine," I said. "Temporary rehoming." Her grin widened just slightly. Victory, but subtle. "I'll grab them." She jogged down the hallway and disappeared toward the stairwell. I didn't close the door. I stepped back inside instead, glancing around my apartment like it had suddenly become a stage. The half-eaten takeout container, the single-lit candle, the slightly crooked throw blanket on the couch. It no longer felt like evidence of loneliness. It felt lived in. When she returned, the roses seemed even larger than before. She carried them carefully, like they actually mattered. "These are heavy," she said, as she stepped inside without waiting for a formal invitation, pausing just past the threshold. She looked around briefly, taking in the warm lighting, the soft music still playing faintly in the background. "You have a nice place." "Thanks," I replied, suddenly hyper-aware of the proximity between us. She placed the bouquet gently on the kitchen counter. The room filled instantly with the scent of roses, fresh, almost overwhelming. It shifted the atmosphere completely. Romantic, intimate, ridiculous. "See?" she said, stepping back to admire them. "Already an upgrade." "Are you always this persuasive?" I asked. "Only when I see potential," she said lightly. I blinked. "Potential?" "In situations," she clarified, but the hint of a smirk told me she knew exactly how that sounded. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, but playful. My earlier sadness had retreated to the background, replaced by something unfamiliar and slightly dangerous. I realized I was smiling. Not politely, not defensively, just because. She glanced at the wine glass on my counter. "Red?" she asked. "Yes." She hesitated for half a second, then lifted a brow. "Are you going to make me stand here as a temporary floral consultant? Or are you going to pour me one?" The boldness of it made my stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with heartbreak. "Only if you promise this doesn't count as attempt number 2, I replied. Her eyes softened. Amused, curious, warm all at once. "Claire," she said, tasting my name like she'd been waiting to use it properly. "I'm very patient." And that was the moment I realized this night was no longer about surviving Valentine's Day. It was about seeing what happened when I stopped bracing for disappointment. Harper slipped off her rain-damp jacket and draped it over the back of one of my kitchen chairs like she'd been here before. Underneath, she wore a simple black long-sleeve shirt, sleeves pushed up just enough to reveal toned forearms dusted with faint freckles. I noticed. I absolutely noticed. And I hated that my brain had switched from heartbreak processing mode to admiring delivery girl mode in less than 20 minutes. I handed her a glass of wine, deliberately keeping my expression neutral. "Temporary floral consultant privileges include one pour," I said. She accepted it with an exaggerated nod. "I feel honored." We clinked glasses lightly. The sound was small but intimate in the quiet apartment. For a second, neither of us drank. We just stood there, closer than necessary, roses behind her like a cinematic prop I hadn't ordered but was suddenly grateful for. "So," she said finally, taking a sip, "be honest. Were you planning to sit here all night pretending February 14th was just a regular Friday?" "I was going to binge a crime documentary and feel emotionally superior to strangers making terrible life choices," I replied. She laughed softly. A healthy coping mechanism. I prefer structured distraction." "And does it work?" "Usually." Her eyes held mine, but not tonight. It wasn't a question. I exhaled slowly. "Not tonight." She didn't press. She didn't give me that overly sympathetic look people default to when they sense vulnerability. Instead, she leaned back slightly against the counter, comfortable but attentive. "Break up?" she asked gently. 2 weeks ago," I said. Fresh, technically marinating. That made her grin. "Was she terrible?" "No," which is almost worse. I took a sip of wine, letting it settle before continuing. "We just wanted different futures. She was ready for houses and timelines. I'm still figuring out what I want." Harper nodded slowly, like that answer made sense. "That's not a flaw," she said. "That's honest." It didn't feel honest when I was packing her side of the closet. She studied me for a moment, not analyzing, just seeing. "You don't look like someone who makes impulsive decisions." "I don't." "Then maybe you trusted yourself." The simplicity of that hit harder than I expected. No dramatic advice, no romantic cliches, just a reframing that felt oddly steady. "You do this often?" I asked. "Deliver flowers?" "Therapy disguised as logistics." She smiled into her wine glass. "Occupational hazard. You see enough grand gestures, you start recognizing which ones are real and which ones are panic." "And which was mine?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her gaze sharpened just slightly. "Yours wasn't panic," she said. "Panic is loud. You're quieter." The air shifted. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't sad. But it was undeniably more intimate. The music playing softly from my speaker, something mellow and acoustic, suddenly felt like it had volume. I became acutely aware of how close we were standing, the scent of roses mixed with wine, the warmth of the apartment against the rain outside. I set my glass down first. "So what about you?" I asked. "You drive around delivering love all day. What's your Valentine story?" She tilted her head, considering. "Last year I was in a relationship," she said. "This year I signed up for overtime shifts." "That feels intentional." "It was," she admitted. "I'd rather be in motion than sitting still thinking about what didn't work." I nodded slowly. "So we're both pretending we're unaffected." "Not pretending," she corrected. "Redirecting." I laughed softly. "You're dangerously good at this." "Good at what?" "Making this feel less pathetic." Her expression softened, not amused this time, but sincere. "It's not pathetic to be alone tonight," she said. "It's just unfinished." Something about that word made my chest tighten. Unfinished. Before I could respond, she reached for her glass again, but misjudged slightly. Her fingers brushed mine. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. But the contact was warm, immediate, charged. Neither of us pulled away right away. Her eyes flicked down briefly to where our hands touched, then back up to mine. I felt heat creep up my neck, sudden and uninvited. My pulse shifted, not panicked, aware. "Sorry," she murmured softly. "You're holding the glass," I replied, voice lower than before. "I'm technically the obstacle." A corner of her mouth lifted. That's a bold thing to admit. The space between us narrowed without either of us making a conscious decision. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough that I could see the faint gold flecks in her blue eyes. Just enough that the world outside my apartment, Instagram, Emily, timelines, expectations, felt temporarily suspended. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't replacement. This was something entirely new. She leaned back first, subtle but intentional. "We should probably keep this professional," she said lightly. "You already left the roses," I reminded her. She smiled. "Fair." The mood shifted again, back toward playful, but not all the way. The tension lingered in the air like static waiting for the right moment. And for the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about who had left. I was thinking about who had stayed. The roses sat on my counter like a dare. Too red. Too dramatic. Too symbolic for a night I had planned to keep emotionally neutral. Harper stepped closer to them, fingers lightly brushing one of the stems as if testing whether they were real. "I should probably remove the card," she said casually, "in case Claire Benson calls and demands evidence. Or in case the universe thinks I stole someone else's romance," I replied. She smiled faintly and untucked the small white envelope from between the blooms. For a moment she hesitated. "You want to read it?" I shook my head immediately. "No. That feels like opening someone else's diary." "Fair." She flipped it over instead, not reading the message but glancing at the sender's name. Her brows lifted slightly. "Huh. What?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied the card again before sliding it back into the envelope. "Nothing dramatic," she said lightly. "Just interesting." "That's ominous." She laughed softly. "It's from a guy I delivered to earlier this week. Same handwriting, same grand gestures, different name on the envelope." I stared at her. "You're kidding." "I wish." She leaned back against the counter again. Seattle might be subtle about romance, but some people are not. So this mysterious man sent elaborate roses to 2 different women in the same week. 3, she corrected calmly. I blinked. "That's almost impressive. Or exhausting." She tilted her head. "It's funny how some people think bigger gestures equal deeper feelings. And they don't?" She looked at me directly this time. "Not always." The air changed again, not heavy, but thoughtful. The roses no longer felt romantic. They felt absurd. "Well," I said, crossing my arms loosely, "I'm glad they ended up here instead of with Claire Benson." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "Yeah?" "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my tone. At least here they're not pretending to mean something they don't. There was a quiet pause after that. Not awkward, not strained, just charged with awareness. "Can I ask you something?" Harper said. "Depends." "Do you miss her?" she asked gently. "Or do you miss the version of yourself you were when you were with her?" The question caught me off guard. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked toward the living room and sank down onto the couch, the candlelight flickering across the walls. She followed, slower this time, sitting beside me, but not touching. "Not yet. I think," I said carefully, "I miss the certainty, the idea that someone had chosen me long-term." "That's honest," she replied. "But I don't miss shrinking parts of myself to make it work," I added quietly. She nodded once. "Then you didn't lose everything." Her knee brushed mine when she shifted slightly. A small contact. Intentional? Maybe not. But neither of us corrected it. The warmth of her leg against mine felt grounding, not overwhelming. The scent of roses drifted faintly from the kitchen, blending with the red wine lingering on my breath. "Do you ever get tired of watching other people fall in love?" I asked. She leaned back against the couch, shoulder barely grazing mine now. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it's also hopeful." "Hopeful?" "Yeah." She glanced at me sideways. "Because it reminds me that timing is unpredictable." I turned slightly toward her. "Unpredictable how?" "Like tonight," she said quietly. I was supposed to drop off flowers and keep moving. And instead, her eyes held mine, softer now, but steady. Instead, I'm here. The simplicity of that statement made my chest tighten in a way that felt unfamiliar and thrilling all at once. I don't know who moved first. Maybe neither of us did. Maybe proximity just closed naturally. But suddenly her shoulder was pressed more firmly against mine, her warmth unmistakable, the silence stretched, comfortable and electric. I could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing. My pulse responded in kind. "This is probably a bad idea," I murmured. "Probably," she agreed. Neither of us moved away. She shifted slightly, turning her body toward me more fully. Her hand rested casually along the back of the couch, just behind my shoulders. Not possessive, not invasive, just there. The gesture felt protective in a way that surprised me. "You don't look broken," she said softly. "I'm not," I replied. "Just recalibrating." Her lips curved faintly. That's a good word. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't thoughtful. It was anticipation. My heart wasn't aching anymore. It wasn't heavy with comparison or regret. It was alert, curious, alive in a way it hadn't been all day. I realized then that Valentine's Day had stopped being about Emily hours ago. It was about the woman sitting inches from me. About the way her gaze lingered just a fraction too long. About the way her hand hovered closer to my shoulder without quite settling. About the fact that I didn't want her to leave. Her fingers finally brushed lightly against my upper arm, testing, asking without words. I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned in slightly. Not enough to close the space, just enough to say I wasn't afraid of it. Her hand slid more confidently around my shoulder then, drawing me into a gentle embrace. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was warm, steady, real. And as I rested against her, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing against my side, I realized something quietly profound. I had started the day bracing myself for loneliness. I was ending it in someone's arms. And this wasn't pity. This wasn't rebound. This felt like the first chapter of something I hadn't seen coming. And for the first time since the breakup, I didn't feel unfinished. I felt open. I don't know how long we stayed like that, me tucked against her side, her arm warm around my shoulders, but at some point the quiet shifted. Not heavier, not awkward, just charged. Harper leaned back slightly, just enough to look at me fully, and the absence of distance felt louder than the embrace had. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I replied, and I meant it. Her thumb traced a small, absent-minded circle near my upper arm, and the gesture felt deliberate now. Not friendly, not accidental. My breathing changed before I consciously registered it. I could see the tiny crease near the corner of her mouth when she half smiled. The gold flecks in her eyes caught the candlelight. Everything slowed. "This is probably where I say something charming," she murmured. "You already used all your floral logistics lines." She exhaled a quiet laugh, but she didn't move away. Instead, her hand slid gently from my shoulder to my jaw, fingers warm, cautious, not claiming, just asking. The world narrowed. I felt her breath first, soft, steady, close enough to warm my lips. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I wasn't thinking about Emily. I wasn't thinking about timing or caution or whether this qualified as reckless. I was thinking about the space between us and how little of it was left. "Claire," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I leaned in, barely, just enough. Our noses brushed, the faintest contact, the kind that sends electricity through skin like a warning and an invitation at the same time. My fingers curled slightly into the fabric of her shirt without me meaning to. Her hand tightened subtly at my jaw, and then her phone rang. The sound was so abrupt, so aggressively modern, that we both jumped back like teenagers caught doing something illegal. The tension shattered into awkward laughter. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Harper stared at her vibrating phone like it had personally betrayed her. The screen lit up with a name she clearly recognized. She groaned softly. "Of course. The romantic chaos client, I guessed?" She nodded once, still looking at the screen. It kept ringing. "Are you going to answer?" I asked. She hesitated. The phone rang again. She sighed and swiped to accept the call, turning slightly away but not stepping far. "Hi," she said, tone professional but thinly veiled with impatience. There was a pause while the man on the other end apparently spoke in a rapid panic. Harper closed her eyes briefly. "Yes," I attempted delivery. Another pause. "No, she wasn't home." A longer pause. Her expression shifted to disbelief. Sir, I can't guarantee emotional outcomes. I pressed my lips together to stop from laughing. She turned slightly toward me as the voice on the other end grew louder. No, she continued calmly. Sending a second bouquet tonight is not going to undo whatever you did this morning. A pause. That's not how flowers work. I covered my mouth. Sir, she said firmly now, you've already sent 3 arrangements this week. If the issue is consistency, I would recommend a conversation, not carnations. There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by what sounded like frustrated sputtering. Harper's gaze met mine again, and something unspoken passed between us. Solidarity, maybe. Look, she finished, tone softening but not yielding. I'll attempt delivery again tomorrow. Tonight? I'm off the clock. She hung up. The quiet returned, but different now. Lighter, sharper. Well, I said carefully. That sounded intense. She slid her phone into her back pocket. He thinks romance is something you can outsource, and is it? Her eyes held mine again. No. A beat passed. You're technically still on shift, I said lightly. She shook her head. Not anymore. The words didn't feel casual. They felt chosen. I studied her for a second. Are you sure? Because I don't want to be the reason you get fired from your extremely serious flower empire. She stepped closer again, slowly this time, deliberately reclaiming the space that had been interrupted. Claire, she said quietly, I've been delivering other people's love all day. Her hand brushed my wrist now, fingers warm and steady. I'd rather stay here. The simplicity of it stole the breath from my lungs. No performance, no dramatic declarations. Just presence. I swallowed softly. And do what? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Her lips curved slightly. Not cocky, not smug. Just certain. Let's see what happens when we stop planning. My pulse answered before I could. The roses behind her no longer felt like props. They felt irrelevant. Because whatever this was, it wasn't about grand gestures, it was about timing. And for the first time all night, I wasn't bracing for the ending. I was leaning toward the beginning. For a moment after she said it, we just stood there, close enough to feel each other's warmth, far enough that either of us could still retreat. I realized something quietly radical. I didn't want to retreat. Not tonight. Not when the air felt this alive. So, I said, forcing a playful steadiness into my voice, if we're officially off the clock, what happens now? Harper glanced toward my speaker. The mellow acoustic track had ended, replaced by something with a slightly stronger rhythm. She tilted her head, listening. We could test a theory. What theory? That Valentine's Day doesn't belong to people with reservations. Before I could ask what that meant, she reached for my hand. Not sudden, not urgent. Just deliberate. Her fingers laced with mine naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Come on, she said. You're not about to make me slow dance in my own living room, are you? Absolutely. I laughed. But I didn't resist as she pulled me gently toward the center of the room. The candlelight flickered softly against the walls, casting long shadows. The roses stood dramatically on the counter like over-invested witnesses. This is ridiculous, I murmured. Only if you think too hard about it. She stepped closer, one hand still holding mine, the other resting lightly at my waist. Not possessive, not demanding, just steady. My hands hesitated before settling against her shoulders. I could feel the heat of her body through the thin fabric of her shirt. We swayed, slightly offbeat at first. I was aware of everything, her breathing, the subtle scent of rain still clinging to her hair, the way her thumb traced small patterns against my lower back. You don't look like someone who dances often, she observed softly. I prefer structured distraction, remember? Maybe structure's overrated. She spun me gently, awkwardly actually. I stumbled half a step and collided back into her, laughing. The sound came out freer than anything I'd felt all week. There, she said, that's the version of you I like. You've known me for an hour. Exactly. The music slowed again, and so did we. The laughter faded naturally into something quieter. My hand slid from her shoulder to the back of her neck without conscious permission. Her fingers tightened slightly at my waist. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. The playful energy melted into awareness. My gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. She noticed. Her breath hitched, just slightly. You don't have to be brave tonight, she said softly. I'm not trying to be brave. Then what are you trying to be? I met her eyes fully now, honest. That changed everything. There was no dramatic buildup, no countdown, just gravity. I moved first. Not fast, not urgent. I closed the last inch between us with quiet certainty. Our lips met gently at first, testing, almost curious. The contact was warm, steady, unhurried. Not desperate, not performative. Just right. The world didn't explode. It softened. Her hand slid more firmly around my waist, drawing me closer, and the kiss deepened naturally. I felt her exhale against my mouth, felt the way she tilted her head slightly to fit better against me. My fingers curled into her hair at the base of her neck, anchoring. When we finally pulled back for air, neither of us stepped away. Her forehead rested lightly against mine. "Still think this was a bad idea?" she murmured. I smiled faintly, breath uneven. "I think it was overdue." She kissed me again, slower this time, deeper. The kind of kiss that doesn't rush because it doesn't have to. My body responded instinctively, closing the distance entirely. There was no space left between us now. And yet, it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt steady, grounded. Her hands traced along my sides, exploratory but respectful. I felt heat bloom under my skin where she touched me. My heart wasn't racing from anxiety anymore. It was racing from anticipation. This wasn't rebound energy. This wasn't loneliness seeking distraction. This was desire meeting possibility. When we finally separated slightly, both of us breathing heavier now, I searched her expression for doubt. There wasn't any. Only warmth. Only curiosity. Only that same deliberate presence she'd had since she first stepped through my door. "Claire," she said quietly, brushing her thumb along my jaw again, "I don't want this to be a February 14th thing. It's not." I replied immediately, and I meant it. Because the sadness that had shadowed me all day was gone. Not erased, but transformed. It felt smaller now, less defining. Harper didn't fill a void, she disrupted it. And as she leaned in to kiss me again, soft, lingering, confident, I realized something that felt almost laughably simple. I hadn't needed grand gestures. I hadn't needed certainty about the next 5 years. I had just needed one unexpected knock at my door, and the courage to open it. We didn't rush anywhere after that. That surprised me the most. There was no frantic escalation. No need to prove anything with urgency. We stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing still slightly uneven, as if both of us understood that what made this powerful wasn't speed. It was intention. Harper brushed a loose strand of hair away from my face, her fingertips lingering just long enough to feel deliberate. "You okay?" she asked again. But this time it wasn't about the breakup. It was about us. "I'm better than okay," I said honestly. She studied my face as if searching for hesitation. "This isn't about filling space, right?" The directness didn't offend me. It grounded me. "If I wanted to fill space," I replied softly, "I would have opened a dating app." That earned a small smile from her, but her gaze remained thoughtful. "Good," she said quietly. "Because I don't do temporary well." Something shifted inside me at that. "You don't?" I asked. She shook her head slightly. 2 years ago, I ended something on Valentine's Day. I thought it was poetic at the time, dramatic, clean. She let out a soft breath. It wasn't clean. It was messy and loud and took months to stop echoing. I listened carefully, not interrupting. "She loved grand gestures," Harper continued. "The bigger the bouquet, the bigger the apology." And I confused effort with consistency. She glanced toward the roses on the counter. "Now I spend this day watching other people make the same mistake." "And tonight?" I asked. Her eyes returned to mine. "Tonight feels different." I reached for her hand then, intentionally this time. My thumb traced the inside of her wrist, slow and steady. "It is," I said. The air thickened again, but not with doubt, with closeness. She leaned in first this time, but I didn't wait for her to take control of the moment. I met her halfway, pressing my lips to hers with more certainty than before. The kiss deepened naturally, familiar now in a way that startled me. Her hand slid along my waist, drawing me closer, and I responded without hesitation. I shifted slightly, guiding her backward toward the couch. Not forceful, just confident. Her knees hit the edge of it, and she let out a soft, amused exhale before sinking down, pulling me gently with her. I straddled the edge of her lap without thinking too hard about it, and the proximity made everything sharper. Her warmth beneath me, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way her hands moved along my back with growing assurance. "Claire," she murmured between kisses, voice lower now. "Yes?" She hesitated for just a second. "You're sure?" I didn't answer with words. I kissed her again. Slow, deliberate, letting my hands explore the curve of her shoulders, the line of her jaw, the warmth at the base of her neck. She responded immediately, one hand sliding into my hair, the other steady at my waist. This wasn't frantic. It wasn't desperate. It was discovering. Her lips trailed briefly from my mouth to the corner of my jaw, down to my neck, and I felt my breath catch sharply. My fingers tightened slightly in her shirt, grounding myself in the sensation. The candlelight flickered across her features as she looked up at me, eyes darker now, focused, but calm. "Still honest?" she asked softly. "Very," I replied. She smiled faintly before pulling me closer again, our bodies fitting together more naturally now. I could feel the warmth radiating between us, the tension that had built since she first knocked, dissolving into something tangible and real. After a few long, unhurried minutes, I rested my forehead against hers again, breathing steadying gradually. "This doesn't feel like distraction," I admitted quietly. "It's not," she said. "It feels intentional." Her hand slid gently up my back, fingers resting at the base of my neck. "Good." We stayed there like that for a while, close, breathing in sync. No rush to define what was happening. Outside, the rain had softened to a faint whisper against the windows. The world felt smaller somehow, contained within the walls of my apartment. Eventually, she brushed her lips softly against mine one more time, gentle this time, affectionate rather than urgent. "I don't want tonight to end because the clock says it should," she said. "It doesn't have to," I replied. And for the first time all day, Valentine's Day didn't feel like a reminder of something lost. It felt like something found. I woke up before the alarm I hadn't set. For a moment, I didn't move. The apartment felt unfamiliar in the soft gray light of early Seattle morning, like I had stepped into someone else's life overnight. Then I felt it, the steady warmth against my side, the quiet rhythm of breathing not my own. Harper. Memory didn't flood in dramatically. It settled gently. The dancing, the wine, the roses, the way she had looked at me like I wasn't fragile or recovering or recalibrating, just present. She was still asleep, one arm loosely draped over my waist, her hair messy in a way that looked less styled and more real. In daylight, everything could feel different. Brighter, yes, but also clearer, less romanticized. I studied her face carefully, no regret, no tension, just calm. And that scared me more than heartbreak had, because calm meant this wasn't chaos. It wasn't impulse. It was something intentional that had carried into morning. My mind tried to slip into overanalysis. Was this just Valentine's magic? A perfectly timed collision of loneliness and availability? Would daylight shrink what candlelight had made expansive? As if sensing the shift in my breathing, Harper stirred slightly. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light, then landed on me. There was no confusion in her expression, no awkwardness, just recognition. "Morning," she murmured, voice still rough with sleep. "Morning." Her lips curved faintly. "You're thinking too hard." I blinked. "Am I that obvious?" "Your eyebrows do this thing," she said, reaching up to smooth the small crease between them with her thumb. "Like you're negotiating with yourself." I exhaled softly. "It's a habit." "About last night?" "About everything," I admitted. She shifted slightly, propping herself up on one elbow, still close enough that our legs remained tangled. "Okay," she said gently. "Say it." I hesitated for only a second. "I don't want this to be one of those stories that only makes sense on February 14th. She didn't answer immediately. She studied me the same way she had the night before. Steady, grounded. "Good," she said finally. "Good? I don't do seasonal," she replied, brushing her fingers lightly along my arm. "And I don't stay out of politeness." Her hand slid to my jaw again, soft, familiar now. "I stayed because I wanted to," she said. The simplicity disarmed me. I searched her face for uncertainty, for hesitation, for some sign that she might be reconsidering in the clear honesty of morning. There wasn't any. "So what does this look like?" I asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "It looks like coffee, and maybe breakfast, and maybe seeing where this goes without pretending it was an accident." The steadiness in her voice anchored something inside me. I leaned in first this time, pressing a slow, warm kiss to her lips. Not urgent, not exploratory, certain. She responded instantly, one hand sliding into my hair, pulling me closer. Morning kisses are different, less spark, more promise. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine again. "You're not broken, Claire," she said softly. "I know." You're just in between. That word again. Unfinished. Except it didn't feel unfinished anymore. It felt like transition. Outside, the city was quieter than the night before. Valentine's decorations still hung in storefront windows, but the urgency had passed. It was just another Saturday now. "Come with me to the shop," she said suddenly. "Your flower empire?" She grinned. "Yes, I need to drop off paperwork, and I'd like to introduce you to the roses that caused a minor ethical crisis." I laughed softly. "Are you asking me on an official second encounter?" "I'm asking you not to disappear." The directness warmed me. "I won't," I said, and I meant it. Because the sadness I had woken up with yesterday morning felt distant now. Not erased, not invalidated, just less powerful. Harper wasn't replacing something. She was adding something new. We got out of bed slowly, unhurried. There was no rush to define what we were yet, but there was clarity in the way we moved around each other. Comfortable, aware, intentional. She pulled on her jacket, then paused at the door. "You know," she said, "you technically never received flowers yesterday." I crossed my arms, amused. "Temporary rehoming doesn't count?" "Not officially." She stepped closer again, close enough that I could feel her warmth even through layers now. "Maybe today should be intentional," she said softly. I tilted my head. "What does that mean?" She smiled in a way that felt steady rather than teasing. "It means," she said, "this isn't just about a knock on your door. It was about choosing to open it again." And as we stepped out together into the cool Seattle morning, hand brushing hand before finally lacing naturally together, I realized something quietly powerful. Valentine's Day hadn't saved me. It had simply interrupted me long enough to remind me that my heart still worked. And this time, I wasn't afraid of what it might build next. The flower shop smelled like eucalyptus and fresh stems the moment we stepped inside. It wasn't overly romantic. It was busy, bright, slightly chaotic in the way small businesses are the day after a holiday. Buckets of unsold arrangements lined the walls. Pink tissue paper littered the counter. A chalkboard sign near the register read, "Post-Valentine's discount. Love doesn't expire." Harper pushed the door open for me and glanced back over her shoulder. "Welcome to the Empire," she said lightly. "This is where the magic happens?" I asked. "This is where the logistics happen," she corrected. Magic is unpredictable. I watched her move behind the counter with ease, greeting a coworker, setting down paperwork, adjusting a display of tulips like she'd been doing this her whole life. She fit here, not in a performative way, naturally. I felt something shift inside me again, but this time it wasn't tension. It was clarity. She looked up and caught me staring. "What?" she asked. "You look sure," I said. "About the shop?" "About yourself." She smiled softly. Took a while. I walked slowly around the small space, brushing my fingers lightly against the petals of different arrangements. None of them felt like last night's roses. Those had been dramatic, almost theatrical. These felt grounded, intentional. A single white rose caught my eye in a smaller bucket near the register. It wasn't oversized or overwrapped, just clean, simple. I picked it up. Harper noticed immediately. "Careful," she said. "That one doesn't come with a temporary rehoming clause." "Good," I replied. I walked back toward her and held it out. "For you," she blinked, surprised. "Claire." "Intentional," I said quietly. The words settled between us. Her expression softened in a way I hadn't seen yet. Less teasing, less guarded, just open. She accepted the rose carefully, fingers brushing mine in the exchange. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know." There was no grand speech, no dramatic confession echoing through the shop. Just a small, deliberate act that meant more than any bouquet dropped at the wrong door. She leaned in and kissed me gently. Brief, warm, steady, not for an audience, not for effect, just because she wanted to. A coworker whistled softly from somewhere near the back. Harper rolled her eyes without pulling away. "Occupational hazard," she muttered. I laughed. It felt different than the night before. Not lighter. Stronger. We finished up quickly after that, and when we stepped back outside into the cool Seattle air, the city looked unchanged, but I didn't feel the same walking through it. We passed restaurant windows where couples were still lingering over late brunch, past storefronts with discounted heart decorations, past strangers who didn't know that my entire day yesterday had shifted because someone rang a doorbell. Harper slipped her hand into mine again without hesitation. "So," she said casually. "Coffee? Coffee sounds dangerously official," I replied. Good. We walked side by side down the sidewalk, hands intertwined, pace unhurried. There was no pressure to define anything yet, but there was no hesitation either. The air between us felt steady, balanced. I meant what I said, she added quietly. About not doing seasonal? She nodded. I don't either, I said. And that was the truth. I wasn't clinging to her because she'd shown up on a vulnerable night. I was choosing her because she had stayed, because she had asked questions instead of assuming answers, because she hadn't tried to rescue me, only to stand next to me. As we reached the corner cafe, she paused slightly. One more thing, she said. What, if I knock on your door again, it won't be an accident. I smiled slowly. You won't have to knock. And that was the moment it became simple. Not easy, not guaranteed, but simple. I had started Valentine's Day preparing to endure it. I had ended it learning something unexpected. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a clipboard, rain in its hair, and a slightly crooked smile. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't planning your future, it's opening your door. Valentine's Day didn't fix my heart. It reminded me that it still worked. And this time, I wasn't afraid to let it build something new.